Welcome to our webinar, and we are very happy to have this opportunity to celebrate our new journey together as Institute of the Blessed Virgin Mary and Congregation of Jesus at the United Nations. We are on from many countries, and we're happy to have sisters from the Congregation of Jesus, from the Institute of the Blessed Virgin Mary, colleagues, friends, and associates. So thank you all for coming on. And I'm Cecilia O'Dwyer. I'm a Loreto sister and our representative at the United Nations in New York for the past 4.5 years. And I'm very happy with the new step we're taking as Mary Ward family. So here beside me, or not beside me, in another part of New York City, is Sister Cynthia, who's with me here in New York, and your representative from the Congregation of Jesus. So I'll hand you over to Cynthia now.
Hi, good morning. I'm Cynthia, CJ, and very happy to join you all for this webcast. I'm here since 22nd of October, working with Cecilia as we collaborate with the IBVM, and it's very exciting and interesting work that we are doing at the UN. Well, the story of our IBVM CJ collaboration is much longer and larger. But in 2011, as all of you know, we had the general chapter in which for the general leadership, one of the mandates was to take advice and action in establishing CJ representation at the UN and or other international forums. And another mandate was to explore further inter-branch collaboration. So we are here, and of course I have attended the DPI conference in 2007. You can see Sister Pat and me. It was a conference on the climate change. And in 2016, many of us from India and other countries, CJs and IBVMs had attended the conference in Korea, South Korea. Yes, these are some photos. It was on the Sustainable Development Goals.
Yes, and now for a little history of the IBVM with the United Nations. And first of all, the United Nations, the three pillars of the United Nations are peace and security, human rights, and development. And we are in the part of development, right? And in 2003, that's 15 years ago, we joined the United Nations through the Department of Public Information. And that mainly has to do with making known the United Nations to our membership and all the work of the United Nations. And then in 2015, we got consultative status with the United Nations through the Economic and Social Council, which is called ECOSOC. So this gives us more direct engagement with the United Nations.
Okay, now this is UN headquarters. The tall building is the UN Secretariat with all the other departments. And the countries which are called here, the missions, we call the countries missions here. And the NGOs do not have office in this building, this tall building which you are seeing. We go into the lower part of UN building where there are many conference rooms in which meetings and conferences are arranged by UN and NGOs where we attend meetings.
Right. Now, when we were preparing webinar, we asked you to send in questions to us so that we could actually prepare the content of the webinar on your questions. So we had lots of why, how, can you make a difference, tell us about, what difference does it make? And then with all your questions, we just gather them together into 4 groupings. So here you have an overview of the content, right? And there's one part of it which has to do with meaning, benefits, and challenges. And another part that has to do, you've asked about how our NGO works with the United Nations. Another part of it is on the ground, what do we do? It's about our global network and the United Nations. And then there's the other part of it, which it has to do with how can I help? And there are questions about youth. How can youth be involved? So we will try to take these in turn and answer them and give you as much information as we possibly can. So we'll begin with the meaning, benefits, and challenges now. And I'll just take a look at that. It is quite personal, of course, when you start to look at the meaning of anything, no? So I thought, first of all, I'm just going to look, you're talking about persons and who are also citizens. So we are citizens, and I'm just going to begin in that respect, right? And it is about understanding how we relate and our place in all of this, you know, from the local citizenship up to the level of, or out to the level of what would be the United Nations. So as a citizen, we work at our local and national level. Sorry. We work at our local and national level, right? So we have local authorities, we have national governments, right? Then national governments get together in different ways, in groupings, and some of those would be like the European Union, the African Union, and G7 and different groupings like that, right? And then you have the global dimension. Now, the global dimension, really the only body that you have that you could actually say this is a totally global body where each country has its own vote and its own place, that is the United Nations. Now, the United Nations as such is not a governing body, it's not a government, right? But at the same time, it is the space and what is nearest to a global government, even though it doesn't have that kind of legislative power as such, right? The local issues are brought up through the system through to that level, and then decisions are taken there and they're brought back down to country level and then to local level and back down to the personal level. And that is how the way it works at the level of citizens. So we are all citizens, right? We are also persons, human beings. And as human beings, for example, I'll just take the example of myself, right? I'm a woman. I'm a member of a religious congregation. I belong to the Catholic Church. I have a series of values and principles and a spirituality, and that is all part of who I am. And with that, I am part of larger groupings of persons other than the state as well. I'm part of my religious congregation, and I am part of the human family. So I belong, and we all belong to larger groups, ongoing groups, right? As persons and as citizens. So when we look here, it's all together. We are persons, we are citizens, we belong to the human family, and we belong to a kind of a global structure which creates possibilities for legislation of the whole body. We also know that at this point, there are many issues which are what you'd call supranational. They cannot be addressed. There are issues that are global. They cannot be addressed by national governments. So we need something at global level, right? So that's part of the kind of understanding that we are as individuals part of something which is much larger than ourselves in different ways. Then I see the human family when I look at myself at the United Nations and what we're trying to do there, and when we're all gathered, we are really representing the human family and its struggles and its moves towards greater complexity all the time, right? Sometimes we think we come to a plateau and that we're going to stay still for a while, but then in no time we begin to move again. And now this is all part of our ongoing evolution, I think, and we have all kinds of advances happening the whole time, but then they're always full of conflicts and misunderstandings in a whole growth process, right? Then there's another dimension I'd like to mention, and it is how I understand it from the transcendent and from the spiritual dimension as well. My presence here at the United Nations and belonging to the Ignatian tradition of finding God in all and all in God, I see God and the divine energy of God at work in everything here at the United Nations. It is really a sacred ground and a sacred space because it is trying to address the great problems and the great aspects of all creation, actually, because it's people, it's planet, it's outer space. This is where the governments come to address all of these areas of our creation at this point in time, and with that it has its human limits. So that's kind of the way I understand it after my 4.5 years here. Then from the point of view of benefits, because people asked, what's the use of being here? Now, well, I see the United Nations as a space where we can support all the good that can be done. And we can keep the voice of the most vulnerable and marginalized people present and visible in the conversations here, which lead to decisions made by member states. And we can make our own membership aware of their role, or of your role, or of our role as citizens with regard to the implementation of the decisions made at the United Nations, and allow you to contribute from your experience on the ground as well. So we've got all these different benefits, which I would see. Then from the point of view of the challenges, like I see the challenges as those of every human organization, because it is a meeting of people made up of human beings. You have the amazing people, you have the steady people who keep the thing flowing, and then you have the people with very questionable behavior, which we hear about all the time, because we hear much more about them than we do about the wonderful people that are there. Then on the other hand, you have the very effective people, you have the less effective people, and you have the totally dysfunctional people, and they're all in together. So, it is a challenge. It's a challenge for everyone to be able to manage all of that, and then I suppose from a kind of a personal point of view, it's a challenge I would see it, to be in the right place at the right time so that the work in hand can be most effective. Now, and this is kind of a learning process, learning where to be and when to be where I should be, that kind of thing. So that is basically kind of my rendering of those questions. Cynthia, would you like to come in there?
Sure.
Yeah.
My experience being here for almost 4 months is that I came as an Indian citizen, and I have the feeling that I belong to the whole humanity. Of course, the feeling was there, but the feeling that I am a global citizen now, and the UN is a place where the pain of the whole world is held together. That's what when I enter the UN headquarters, I get this feeling. And it is here the heartbeat of nations are monitored. And it is here the countries together and are called to be agents of common good of the people and the planet, as Cecilia rightly mentioned. And it is the only place where global issues are discussed and policies are made. For example, we have this global compact on migration and refugees. Now the negotiation is going to take place. So this is where the global issues, the problems are brought together, and they try to address the issues. And we are here to make sure that these countries and the UN agencies keep up the promises they make. Together, we can expand our global outreach to address global problems at a systematic level. We can collaborate on international issues of concern being here. It is an involvement from micro level to macro level and vice versa. Of course, as Keller rightly said, alone we can do little, together we can do so much. So that's what I feel. Of course, I have also faced the challenges as I came as a new person, because the UN, which is in itself very complex, and with the UN vocabularies, structures, the conferences, meetings, one feel lost at the beginning if you are a newcomer, and takes time to have a proper understanding of the whole working system. Of course, with the experience of Cecilia, I was able to understand it much better and get into the work now. And well, the advocacy at the international will only be fruitful if the same takes place at national level, since implementation has to happen at the country level. That is one of the challenges we face. Because to be more effective at the UN, we cannot work in isolation, but we must work in partnership. This involves close cooperation and networking with other NGOs and the mission, which is the governments. Any work to bring about a systematic change at the international level, it must link closely with ours working at a grassroots level. So we need you all to collaborate, to work together.
Thank you, Cynthia. We'll move on now to the next block. And I'd just like to mention, in case, any of you are having problems, there are just the two of us here running the whole thing. And if you have questions, we really aren't able to manage them. That's why we asked you to send the questions beforehand. So I just like you to know that. So don't think it is we don't want to. It's just that we can't, because we're trying to, give the content as well and keep this going. So you'll just have to kind of bear with us in that respect. And I hope everything is going well for you. Right. So now we'll move on to the next block of questions. And it was about how our NGO works with the United Nations in New York, right? So here you have on this slide now, you have got the NGO office, which is our office here, but with the network, right? And between the whole lot of us, we engage with the United Nations, right? It's not the office by itself, it's the office and the office connected with the network that engages, right? So now, a very important framework for this engagement is what you're going to see now. It is connected with sustainable development. And as you remember, I mentioned at the beginning that one of the three pillars of the United Nations is sustainable development. And that is where we are in the largest sense of the word. And that is where the NGOs are when they're with ECOSOC, right? So anyway, the framework that we have at the moment, and I'll be going into it in more detail afterwards, it's a framework which has to do about people, and it's about people, about ending poverty and hunger for people. It's about people living in prosperity to ensure prosperous and fulfilling lives for people in harmony with nature. It's about our planet, about protecting our planet. It's about peace, a peaceful world. And it is about partnership, that the idea is that we all work together to in a solid global partnership to make all of this true for everybody. Now, you can see down below, I've connected this with justice, peace, and integrity of creation, because that is basically what it is about. It is about justice for people, it is justice for planet. And when we talk about prosperity, it is economic justice, which gives prosperity to everyone. It is about peace, and it's peace for people, it's peace for our planet. And all together in partnership. And when we talk of the integrity of creation, it is creation in which we people, or to which we belong, and with which we are interdependent. So all of this is about the integrity of creation. It is a call to justice and a call to peace. And that is the framework which the United Nations actually offered us, and in a special way in 2015, when it when the United Nations, and it's not the United Nations, it's our countries, took the decision to adopt the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda. And this is the framework for our work. It is actually becoming the framework for nearly everything in the United Nations at the moment. And this is absolutely amazing, because it's giving the whole world, it's kind of giving us a framework so that we can all tune in different ways. Now, we have different kinds of frameworks, right, in our life, because we have the frameworks out of our our general congregations. We have frameworks out of church gatherings. They're all different frameworks where we're given a kind of guidelines, but this is the one given to us by the United Nations, and it coincides very much with what we are about in our work for justice, and it is well worthwhile reading it in terms of the encyclical Laudato Si, because it's all about the same thing. And both of them, the encyclical was edited and was launched just when they were negotiating these sustainable development goals. Now, just to remind, so that we remember, before 2015, we had the Millennium Development Goals, which you all heard about, right? Now, they focused mainly on developing countries, but this is a very different scene. Here we're talking about every country. It's absolutely every country, right? And these goals relate to specific areas of our lives, and we can see all of these areas in our own country and in our own lives. And they are a way of living out our values as well. And living out our values, living out our principles. And it is looking at our world and how we organize ourselves through 17 different lenses, which are all interconnected, right? So if we take each one of these, and what they do, first of all, I think, and what they invite us to do, is to increase our own awareness of each one of these around us. Is sometimes life goes on and we don't pay a lot of attention. We pay attention to some aspects and not so much to others. But these goals are inviting us to look at all these different aspects, and you will find that they cover nearly everything in our ordinary lives, everyday lives. So I'll just say to you, just notice, you just notice around you what's happening about poverty. Notice, is there more? Is there less? Notice what's happening about hunger, where you live. Is there by any chance an increase in hunger, or a decrease, and maybe an increase in healthy food, or an increase in unhealthy food? All of that is related to this goal, right? Health and healthy living and well-being. Now, when we look around us, wherever we are, we have from access to health and well-being, and we can ask ourselves, is it good? Do we have many opportunities, to maintain our well-being and to take care of ourselves? What kind of opportunities do we have? Do we have a lot, or do we have none? We can just notice that all around us. Now, think about the education. There is some of us will have problems of even access to education, and others of quality education, and some will have problems about the price of education. So it's notice what is going on around education. Notice what is going on around gender equality. Now, we have been dealing with the empowerment of women, especially since the Beijing conference in 1995, but gender equality is the equality of men and women, and in every aspect of life. So we're advancing in it, but you just notice how things are where you live and in your part of the world. Now, we can think about clean water and sanitation, and notice what's happening to you where you live, about access to water, the quality of the water, the cost of it. And we're aware that at present time, you have the city of Cape Town, which is facing an extreme drought. So this question of water is becoming more serious as time goes on. Then move on to energy, and notice again the kind of energy where you live, what's happening around energy, what kind of access, what kind of alternative energy exists, what's the cost of energy like. There was one question which mentioned the high cost of solar panels and alternative energy in rural areas, and what can be done about that. Now, there are lots of innovative experiments going on in Asia, and I think it would be interesting to actually look up. There's a website called Sustainable Development Goals, the knowledge platform, and you get lots of information there. Then the question of decent work and economic growth. Now, what's the work like in your part of the world where you live locally? What is decent work? Do people have decent work? If you have economic growth, is it accompanied with decent work? Industry, innovation and infrastructure. What are the roads like? What are the communications like? I only hope that all of you who wanted to get on are able to get on to this webinar, and that the communication is sufficient for you. What kind of innovations are you seeing in your part of the world? Then we move on to inequalities. This is one of the big problems in our world today, and one of the ones that's going to be most serious, most difficult to address, because nobody wants to address it, or at least the people who are on the winning side don't want to address it, and it's going to be very difficult. We're seeing that already. So, but just look at inequalities where you live and see what's happening there. We move on to sustainable cities. If you live in a city, what is it like? Or in your community, your local civic community, what is that like? What's happening there? What's the air quality like? What kind of transport? What kind of housing? Do you have green spaces? Because all of these kind of things we're working towards them, and every place needs improvement. So just notice how it is for you. Then we have responsible consumption and production, which is another area of our lives. I think we're becoming more aware of the consumption, the responsible consumption part of it. We're hearing more about it, but there's a lot that we can do there, and a lot of knowledge we can gain about that area of responsible consumption. But then the production part of it, for example, the kind of the workers' rights, what's happening to the environment with the production, the quantity of production, what's it doing to the resources of our planet, all of that, and see what's happening around you. Now, climate action, notice what's happening, what changes are happening, and when you go out and you see unusual climate, just think of this goal that's telling us that we have to take action on climate. Now, life below water. There again, just we've been hearing a lot about the awful plastic floating on the oceans. We've been hearing what's happening to the fish because of plastic and many other things. So when we buy our fish, well, we can think of where it comes from. What, yeah, you know, has it been affected by plastic, by the small plastic beads that are around everywhere? So, and then we can think of our coral reefs. We're hearing a lot of what's happening to them as well. So, we keep those present and in our minds and just keep noticing. And then life on land, the same. Notice what's happening around us on the land. And the connection, notice the connection, land, city, and hunger. Somebody asked, if cities are getting larger because more people are living, then the land is being taken over. So then what's happening about hunger? Think about how all of those interact, if the land, what are we doing to the land? Are we able to produce enough food on the land we have? To feed our cities and to avoid hunger, and then how's it organized? And when we go to the markets, we can just notice what's happening, where the food comes from, and all the rest of it. And then we look at peace, justice, and strong institutions. Now, peace sounds ethereal, but we know what it is like when we live in peace. And very often, a very important part of peace from the civil point of view or the state point of view is justice, to have a good justice system and strong institutions. That is, good governance is essential for peace, and a good justice system. So that is why it's included in this, because it is not only the internal, it is also the internal, the inner, our inner world, which brings us peace. But at the same time, we have these other aspects which are exterior to us, right? And then goal number 17 is about partnerships, and that's how we can help each other, how we help each other among nations, and how we can form partnerships with business, that speak a lot of business, with civil society, with the academic world and the scientific world. And in that as well, they talk about the technology, how we have to share so that the whole world is able to have access to technology, which I hope everybody wanting to get on to this webinar was able to do. So that is how our life connects with these sustainable development goals, and our work also, because when we're working either directly or indirectly related to all of these, maybe some more specifically, but somehow or other they're all involved, right? So as well as the 17 goals, they're accompanied by 169 targets. Now, somebody asked specifically, where do we get the 169 targets? And you have the address there. It's Sustainable Development, UN.org, and it is the Sustainable Development Knowledge Platform. You will have the goals there, and you click on the goal and you have all the targets. But the targets are where they go into the details of these goals. For example, when you're looking at poverty, now one of the targets has to do about social protection, as a means for eradicating poverty. For example, in goal 4, which is about education, you will have one target there which has to do with education for global citizenship. Now, we work on human trafficking. It's one of our issues or areas. And then there are goals there related, and you'll have the targets in those goals. In goal 5, in goal 8, and in goal 16, you'll have targets related to human trafficking. And then all of these are all interconnected, right? I just kind of mentioned how they are in our life, now, but then they are all interconnected. Now, and Cynthia, will you come in here and just give us a little on how they're all interconnected and how you see that, please?
Okay, as Sister rightly mentioned, all 17 Sustainable Development Goals are very much connected to each other. When we work among those living in extreme poverty, we can see, we know how they have no access to proper food, good health, education. If you are living in poverty, of course, you will not have access to good education and decent work. You will be suffering. You will not be able to get justice. You will not be able to live in peace. So therefore all these goals are interconnected in everyone's life. And especially when I say this year we are celebrating the 70th anniversary of human universal declaration on human rights. So though there is no direct mention of human rights in these 17 goals, but all the sustainable development goals, all these 17 goals are connected to each other. Let's take the goal one, end poverty. That is in Article 22 of Universal Declaration on Human Rights, which says right to social security. Then if we take good health and well-being, goal 3, Article 3 of the Universal Declaration on Human Rights says we as human beings have the right to life. Take goal 4, quality education. Article 26 of the UDHR, the Universal Declaration on Human Rights, says we have the right to education. Goal 5, gender equality. Article 2 says freedom from discrimination as human beings. So, also if we take goal 6, clean water and sanitation. Article 22 says, as human beings, we have the right to social security. Um, Goal 4, affordable and clean energy. Article 25, right to adequate standard of living. So all these goals are interconnected to uh, each other and connected to human rights.
Thank you very much. So that is amazing, and yeah. So so then after once we realize that, and that is something I think that we need to do personal work on it, because it doesn't sink in that easily. It's actually a new way of thinking, and they're all struggling with it, and we're all struggling with it. But we have to move away from thinking in silos to the way that everything is interconnected, right? So we would encourage you to kind of begin to look at all of this as all being interconnected. Now, so we move on now to implementation, accountability, and review. And very often, and actually some of the questions were around this: is this what happens at the UN? Is it all about words, and then they come home and that's the end of it, right? So sometimes it might look like that. Now, because it takes a long time from the time decisions are made at that level. It takes a long time for them to sink, to get into the system at national level and then in at local level. Just the same as those of us who are in either CJ or IBVM, we know that in our congregations, when we have general congregations, the decisions taken there, they don't happen immediately on the ground. They're not implemented immediately. It takes time. It takes sometimes years. So it's the same kind of thing. But anyway, one of the things in the whole 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda, apart from the goals, they have sections on implementation, accountability, and review. And this is where it's really important for us here, because right, when countries say, right, we're going to implement these decisions we've taken. Now, who's going to hold them responsible, or who's going to even notice if they go home and do something about it or not? It has to be civil society. So this is where our role as citizens and as civil society comes in, to actually, keep watching what is happening. Now, there are mechanisms for it as well. Then they promised to be accountable and to do reviews, right? So it wasn't that easy, in the negotiations, similarly come to the decisions around the kind of accountability. But they are actually accountable. First of all, governments are accountable to their citizens, to the people, and that they are, on whose behalf they are working, right? So that's the very first thing. But then, because it is this is a global forum, they're trying to see how they can be accountable. It's basically to one another, and that they can hear each other being accountable on the implementation, right? So then you have work going on at national level on the implementation, and some of us in some provinces are actually in on that now, and it's something that hopefully we'll be able to get more involved in. What our governments are doing at national level to do a review on the implementation. So that is something that we have to. We can work more on. And then at the United Nations itself, they they review a certain number of goals every year, and at a meeting, it's a huge meeting, and it's called High Level Political Forum, which they call HLPF. They love all these anagrams, but it's High Level Political Forum, which is a meeting to review the Sustainable Development Goals. So you have the review of 5 goals, and at the same time, a number of countries, about 50 countries, do a voluntary national review. Now, we as civil society can be involved in that national review, and it is a good idea if we try to get ourselves involved, and we'll keep looking at ways in which we can get involved, right? So there I go to the importance of advocacy, because it's being involved, and it is also bringing our experience from the ground, and that helps change policies and programs. And we can bring it at local level, we can bring it at national level, and we can bring it at the level of the United Nations, right? And we have our mechanisms for getting that experience from you up to this level. We do not have them at the moment so much to get it to national level, and that is something we must see if we can work on at in our provinces and countries. Yes. Now, just to, naturally, that framework that you've seen is massive, and there's no way that 2 of us here in New York could work on all of that together. So I'm just going to give a run through what we're actually focusing on at the moment. Now, it sometimes changes a bit over time, but at the moment and in recent years, we're working on the eradication of poverty throughout the world. That's always present for us, and we do it in different ways. And one specific thing we're working on here at the moment is the idea of universal social protection. It is a means of eradicating poverty, not the only one, but we're working on it here, and the civil society organizations and actually the countries are becoming more and more interested in it. So we're hoping that we, and a lot is being done at country level. So we're hoping that will happen. Those of you who have good social protection and those of you who have none, there's a mighty difference there. Right. Now, we work on human trafficking, and we have a network with people working on the ground, and then we bring that to the UN, and we take part in other activities at the UN on human trafficking, trying to I won't say even stop. We're trying to, because it's impossible to stop it at the moment. It's so deadly. We're working, Cynthia's working on the Global Compact and Migration, and she will talk a bit about that later. We're working on global citizenship as well, in education for global citizenship, especially through, well, it's formal and non-formal education, right? And they're kind of main issues that we're working on. And then there are campaigns like Together, which is, it is to create a positive narrative about migrants, right? That, and a number of people are contributing to that campaign. And then violence against women. We always try to promote anything that can help stop violence against women. And then, as Cynthia already said, it's the 70th anniversary of the Declaration of Human Rights. Now, and all of this, when we're trying to do it, we look at it through the lens of women and girls. Uh, that will include the empowerment of men as well, but especially through the lens of women and girls, and thinking especially of the most marginalized, right? And then always based on the fulfillment of their human rights. Now, we work in collaboration, and Cynthia's mentioned that already, and you might like to come in here again, Cynthia, would you?
Yes. We work with groups, different groups, and one is major groups. You can see here. Uh, this is officially called major groups, include women, children and youth, indigenous people. We are all are working among these people. Then non-governmental organizations where we come, local authorities, workers and trade unions, business and industry, scientific and technological community. These are called major groups. We work in collaboration with them. Then we have NGO committees. There are thousands of NGOs accredited to ECOSOC and DPI. So according to the priority theme or issues, we come together and we have NGO committee on social development. Of course, we all are working for the social development. So many NGOs are members to this NGO committees on social development. Then we have NGO committees on human trafficking, as Cecilia has already mentioned. Then we have NGO committees for financing for development. If we need social development, we need finance. How do we make our country, our government, uh, accountable to promote or to take to have financing for development? Just speaking about development is it's not going to help. We need finance. The country, the people are in the fund. Then we have NGO committees on migration and refugees. Refugees, as Cecilia mentioned, I am working on it. We have Global Compact on Migration. I would advise you all to read. We can send you this document. Please read through, and as NGOs locally, nationally and internationally, we are invited to give suggestions, and especially these NGO committees on migration, we have come out with 10 acts, which means to give, giving some suggestions and the best practices in order to save, to have, to protect the rights of the migrants and refugees. That also we will be circulating it. We can, registered NGOs can sign all these documents, the suggestions, the best practices, what we suggest to the governments. They will begin the negotiations and they will come out with this global compact on migration. Now the zero draft is already out. So we will send the zero draft and you can go through it. Then we work with the working groups. There are different working groups on various issues, like a working group on girls, where especially we focus on the rights of the girls. Then there are different coalitions, like coalitions for global citizenship to promote sustainable development goal, the 2030 agenda. Then we have the global coalition for social protection. Uh, then we have networking with religious NGOs. There are faith-based NGOs. Then there are other NGOs belonging to different religion. So all these religious NGOs, we work in collaboration with them. Then you see the religious at the UN, which is called RUN, religious at UN. This is a supportive group, all the religious working at you. There are many congregations, sisters working as NGO representative at UN, and we come together once a month. We discuss about our work and how we can support each other. We share knowledge, especially those who come as beginners. We had recently we had orientation for the newcomers, which was very useful. I attended it and it was very beneficial, because to understand the whole system of UN and how as we NGOs, not just NGO but as religious persons committed to this work at UN, how we can make it more beneficial, more beneficial for the people with whom we are working, especially as a grassroots level, and how we can network together to address various issues. And then we have NGO major group. These groups are NGOs which has accreditation to DPI, Department of Public Information, and the ECOSOC. So all these groups are here, and we work in collaboration with them, taking up various issues. As I said, UN is the place where we discuss the global issue, and we are part of all these ongoing negotiations and network.
Thank you, Cynthia. Thank you very much. And we'll move on now to our global network and the United Nations. That is our global network now is it's everyone belonging to us, right? So network engagement is of two types. Now, this is what we've been doing, up to, or trying to develop up to this. There's what we'd call direct engagement and indirect engagement, right? Now, first of all, the support structure for all of this, the NGO or at the United Nations is a general leadership ministry, right? There is an advisory committee. So you have the NGO office in New York. You have at province level, you have province UN representatives. And then you have the worldwide network, and you can see that the province UN representatives are in there in the middle. And I'm just going to do a little more about you, province UN representatives and contact persons. The role is basically, trying to bring together the local and the national, the coordinating it and linking it with the global, helping the local and national level people grow in awareness of the connections between the local and the global. And just to go back there a minute, Cynthia, I would like you to say a few words, about the province UN reps, because you're beginning now. Yeah.
Yes. As of now, for us CJs, the JPIC coordinators with whom I am contacting often, they could be the province UN representative for UN, for our office here. And we need to make it a proper network team. That's what I feel, and that is my hope. Making connection at global, national, and local level is very important. And making the provinces or the regions to understand the importance of our work at UN and it's connected to national and local work is very important because we have the mandate which was decided in our general chapter. So I'm hoping to have this network with the JPIC coordinator. Also, people who are on the ground, who are interested, like now there are many sisters who have joined this, like Yoselet. So I'm very happy that and I'm looking forward to have this network.
Very good. And now this is about networking as well, and this is what we have, the IBVM part at the moment, or have been working on. The province, the province reps have a network, and meet online about 4 times a year. Human trafficking has a network, and global citizenship is a kind of trying to get going. And every now and then there are ad hoc networks. So the possibility of networking is there. There's always the constraint of time, but really, if we can network and if we can get together in cohesive groups, it's excellent. So now I mentioned two kinds of involvement. There's indirect and direct involvement. So the indirect involvement, would you like to come in there,
Yes.
Cynthia, and just talk a
Uh,
bit about that?
Yes,
Mm.
our indirect participation can be like responding to the servers and requests sent from UN or NGO committees or from our office here. We send out survey. For example, the survey sent to know on implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals. How is implemented in your country, in your locality? Or the participation in various UN campaigns, which we have already mentioned. You can have these campaigns in our schools, the students, youth with whom you work, the women with whom you work. Also, you can participate at national level for the universal periodic review of the implementation of human rights. And therefore, it is very important to have a network at national and local level too. The NGO Committee on Migration, for example, sending out the 10 acts, to give our suggestions to the ongoing negotiations by the member states on the Global Compact on Migration that is beginning in the coming week. So these are the ways we can really network.
Thank you. And then the direct involvement. Now, direct involvement is, for example, when you actually come to something at the United Nations, or something run by the United Nations at another in another country. Now, for example, I think what we mainly have attended are the DPI annual conferences, right? Now, we will be beginning perhaps with the high-level political forum, which is the review of the Sustainable Development Goals. There are youth forums. There's the Commission on the Status of Women, which at times people have come as well. The Commission on Social Development, which is at the beginning of February, and it's usually too cold and people don't want to come to New York because it's always snowing. Then there are other UN conferences which people have attended, and which we would invite maybe provinces, or depending on what it is. And then we're beginning to look at the regional meetings, especially related with the high-level political forum. Yeah. So, and then there's another very important aspect and direct way of being involved is actually to come and do an immersion experience at the NGO office here in New York with us. We have had a number of people, and we would love to have more of you come along. If you can come for about 3 months, it would be wonderful, and a wonderful experience for yourself as well. Now, the next part is how can I help, and how can youth become involved? So we'll just leave that to you now to begin with, Cynthia. So you go ahead there with how you can, what I can do when I ask, what can I do?
Okay. When I think what we can do, what I feel is that we need to educate ourselves on SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals. Honestly speaking, all of us are doing wonderful work at grassroots level in different schools, health centers, and social development centers. But how many of us know what is Sustainable Development Goals and how they are connected to our daily life? Honestly speaking, as I said, I neither I knew about it until I attended the conference in South Korea. So we need to educate ourselves. Once we know, we need to create awareness on these sustainable development goals. The people living out there in the world should know uh, this is what the government, my government, has agreed upon, and how do I make them accountable to make it, see that these sustainable development goals are implemented. So again, to see how these SDGs are connected to my life. Uh, Also, the implementation is most important. Ask what is happening about the specific sustainable development goals. Yes, next slide. Next, yeah, next.
The
Oh,
next,
no, just before.
the one, that one, yes.
Yeah, yes. Now you will see the international days. I know all of us are aware of various international days, and we celebrate at local level and international level. So, what we can do is choose some of these United Nations international days and celebrate them with informations, prayer, action with your students, youth, and the women with whom you work. It is to create or to raise awareness. It is a wonderful way of raising awareness. For example, you have 4th of February, World Cancer Day. Then 6th February, International Day of Zero Tolerance on Female Genital Mutilation. Then you have 20th February, World Day of Social Justice. Then you have 1st March, Zero Discrimination Day. Then 8th March, International Women's Day, which all of us celebrate. Then 20th March, International Day of Happiness. So we can very creatively, wherever you are, you need not be a social worker. Wherever you are, in your schools, in your health center, with the people whomever you work with, we can really make it happen. Create awareness about this and celebrate and observe these days. Also, you can join different campaigns, as we have already mentioned. Now, you see there is a Together campaign. This Together campaign, United Nations campaign, which was launched in 2016 to promote, to respect the safety and dignity of migrants and refugees. Thousands and thousands of migrants are refugees are in our country, in our states. Um, and this is this Together campaign is a growing coalition of member states, private sector, civil society representatives, and individuals committed to change negative narratives on migration and to strengthen the social cohesion between the communities of the receiving country and the refugees and migrants. You can also create awareness in your working place, as I said, by participating in this campaign. Then you will see another one, Unite. This is another campaign which was launched by the Secretary General of United Nations in 2008. This campaign aims to raise public awareness and increase political will and resources for preventing and ending all forms of violence against women and girls in all parts of the world. As you must have read in our UN update, there are different parts of our world in our schools. They have already observed this. They are already having this campaign. I'm very happy about it. You may have read about in Nepal, Kathmandu school, how they have observed this day and campaigned. Then we have Stand Up for Human Rights campaign. As I already mentioned, this is the 70th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So we all can be human rights champions. Let us become human rights champions. So how do we support this campaign? You can read this Universal Declaration in your school. First of all, we ourselves should know what are our rights, which is given by birth. So the the Universal Declaration, then take the Human Rights Pledge. If you are familiar with the internet, Google, just click Stand Up for Human Rights campaign. All these activities where you can involve will come up, and you can record your voice, reciting any one of the articles in your own language. So make it very creative with your children, with your staff, and youth. Also have a discussion in your own communities, in your working place, if you are in the university, in the school, and because human rights matter, because we have the right to live a dignified life. And this Orange the World, it's a campaign to end violence against women, and every 25th of the month you can have this Orange Day. You tell your people, your youth or children in the school, wear something orange. It can be a flower, bringing a orange flower, or it can be wearing a orange scarf, or anything to observe that day, and to say um, no to violence against women.
Right, and there were questions about youth action as well, and some along the line of at high school level, the end of high school, because you're already into the youth category, and then youth who are older than between 18 and 35, I think they're considered to be youth. But on the one hand, I mean. It is a very good idea to act if in our schools and with young people, we can actually educate them on the framework of the sustainable development, on human rights. Both need a lot of education and information. It's really the UN, at the UN they're saying it's really quite difficult because they don't know to what extent governments are actually including these in the curriculum, in the school curriculum. Some countries are, and some countries are doing fantastic work. And at our level, I mean, we are doing lots of very, very interesting things on that. Then the youth, now once they leave school, yes, we would love to have a kind of a forum so that our past students would be able to connect somehow or other. Now, they can. It's always about awareness raising, advocacy, and sharing what you're doing. And it can be done at local, national, and international level. But we are trying to get something together. We've been working on it for a while, but we seem to be kind of getting someplace with it at the moment, where to set up some kind of little structure where youth, older youth, may be able to participate. And then we're always aware that we have young sisters, under 35 in a number of countries, and they're actually considered youth. So it would be good to have them included as well. Would you like to say anything on that, Cynthia?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I wish if you could
Yeah.
sisters who are below 35 years from your province or region, that would be a great help, and you can send the names to me, so that we could work out as to how to go about it, this youth action. Yeah.
Thank you. So basically, in the end, we're saying, get involved, make things happen, share. That's what they say the whole time. So we invite you to do that. They keep telling us here, that's what we can do. And there's always the aspect of raising our own awareness, and educating ourselves on all of this. It's an ongoing process. Then we were asked about our hopes for the future. Now, would you like to say something about your hopes for the future there, Cynthia?
Oh, yes, I have great hope. My hope is that we create a strong network among ourselves to communicate, because only through communication we are able to reach out to you, sisters, and to other network. My hope is that we continue to collaborate, network by getting the information, sharing it, getting involved in our UN work here. Hope to fulfill the mandate of GC11, which asks us as a congregation, I quote, to engage structurally at international and NGO level for networking, sharing resources, and concrete actions in working for justice and peace in fulfilling Mary Watt's vision of justice all. Yes, that is my hope.
Thank you. And I suppose I would hope, yeah, that our presence here, will make us all increasingly aware of our place within the global community and the human family. And I think that's very beautiful if we could do our little bit and contribute to that from here. And I think we recognize that our world is growing smaller, and that we must act globally as well as locally at this point. So it's a challenge and it's a hope, and the world is in some ways it's going in that direction, in others it's not. Yeah. Then another hope I think would be that we could have a more active role, as citizens working with governments, so that to help them be accountable, and contribute to the advancement, bringing our in input to policy and programs. Because if we can bring our own life example, our own life experience to that, we will be helping. Yes, so I think that's a kind of my hopes for the future. So then, yeah, then before we finish off, just so that you see, like we work quite hard on communication, and as an educational tool, So like we have the web page, we have Facebook, we have Twitter, we have YouTube channel, we have Instagram, we have WhatsApp, and then we have these go-to meetings and webinars as well, and they're all basically uh, to help us get the word out there, and in the hope, that some of you will be aware of it, and that will help you. What we're doing. We would hope that will help you. So then we can just finish off now by saying that's all, folks. So Cynthia, would you just like to finish off, just to say goodbye before we close
I'll
down?
share the webcam. Are we? Okay. Can you all see me? Okay. I'm happy. Thank you for participating in it, and I hope you are able to get some information about our work and how important it is to have all of us together working so that people out there, our people, benefit from. Because we are here because of the people with whom we are working, especially the people who are left behind. So we'll see that no one is left behind.
Yeah, and thank you very much for coming along and joining the webinar. We really appreciate it, and we are just so happy to represent you here, with civil society, as an NGO, as a faith-based organization, in with the United Nations in New York. It is in many ways a privilege for us, but we're here on behalf of you, and we're very aware of that as well. And just to remind you, to kind of I hope this has been helpful for you, and that it will help you to kind of link up all the different aspects of what we've been saying, and that it will be helpful for you as you move along. So then with that, then we'll say goodbye and thank you so much, and let's hope we'll meet again in the not too distant future. So we'll say a goodbye to you all.
And good night here.
Good night. Wait out live. How do I? Oh yeah, right there. Yeah, and yeah, that's
Keep
it.
in touch.